All right, let's get right into it. If you really want to understand Canada, you have to understand Quebec. I mean, it's not just another province on the map. It's a nation within a nation, a French-speaking society that has fundamentally shaped the entire identity of the country. So today, we're going to dive into that real unique and powerful story.
So here's the central puzzle we need to solve, the big question that drives this whole story. How on earth did a French-speaking Catholic society not only survive after being conquered by the British Empire, but actually go on to become a cornerstone of modern, mostly English-speaking Canada? It's a fascinating story of tension, survival, and a whole lot of negotiation that honestly defines the country even today.
Okay, so to make sense of this, let's look at a quick roadmap. The whole story really unfolds across 4 key moments. We'll start with the first big deal back in 1774. Then we'll jump to the Grand Bargain of Confederation in 1867. After that, things really speed up with the Quiet Revolution in the 1960s. And finally, we'll get to the ultimate test, the sovereignty question, in 1995.
All right, so let's rewind. Our story really kicks off with a conquest. Picture this, it's the 18th century. The British Empire has just taken control of New France. And suddenly, they have a huge problem on their hands. What do you do with 70,000 French-speaking Catholic people who have absolutely zero intention of changing who they are?
So Britain was now in charge of this massive population of French-speaking Catholics. We're talking about the habitants, or the Canadians as they were known. These were farmers, merchants, regular families who were just deeply, deeply rooted in their language, their Catholic faith, and their own unique culture. And their sheer determination to hold on to that way of life, well, it forced Britain's hand. They had to make a huge decision. And that big decision was the Quebec Act of 1774. Okay, pay attention here, because this is a really high-value concept for the citizenship test. The Act did 2 huge things. It guaranteed religious freedom for Catholics, and it brought back French civil law for stuff like property and family disputes. You have to understand, at a time when the British Empire was cracking down on Catholicism everywhere else, this was a totally radical move.
So you gotta ask, why? Why would the British do this? Well, it wasn't out of the goodness of their hearts. It was a purely pragmatic choice. Britain looked at the situation and realized, hey, trying to force these people to become like us could easily start a rebellion. And you have to remember, the American colonies just to the south were getting very restless. So it was just smarter to get the French Canadians on their side by making a deal rather than risking losing control of the entire northern half of the continent.
And this is so important because that one deal has a massive legacy that you can still see today. The Quebec Act is the direct reason why Canada has a mixed legal system. So for private matters, think property, family stuff, Quebec uses the French Civil Code, which is basically a big book of written rules. The rest of Canada? They use British common law, which is built on precedent and centuries of court decisions. This legal split is a fundamental piece of Canada's identity.
Okay, let's fast forward about 100 years to our next big moment. We're talking about Confederation, 1867. And the key thing to remember is that this wasn't just, poof, a new country appeared. Nope, it was another critical negotiation, another huge deal, and Quebec was right at the heart of it all.
The main man for Quebec in these talks was Sir George-Étienne Cartier. He's one of the fathers of Confederation, and he was really the primary architect who designed Quebec's role within this brand new country.
And Cartier had this really powerful vision. He didn't see Confederation as a way for Quebec to get swallowed up. Instead, he framed it as a pact between 2 founding peoples. The bargain was pretty simple and clear. Quebec joins this new country to get economic strength and military security. And in return, the province gets to keep control over all the things that made it unique: its language, its religion, and its own system of civil law.
Okay, hold on. We absolutely need to pause here and clear something up, because it's super easy to get these next few terms confused. And for the citizenship test, you really need to know the difference. So let's take a second and break down who's who in French-speaking Canada.
First up, we have the Acadians. These are the descendants of French colonists who settled way back in the day in what we now call Canada's maritime provinces. Their defining historical moment, and it's a tragic one, was the Great Upheaval, Le Grand Dérangement, when the British forcibly deported thousands of them in the mid-1700s. Now that's different from Quebecers. They're mostly the descendants of settlers who were in the St. Lawrence Valley. Their history was shaped by that Quebec Act we just talked about and later the Quiet Revolution. So please remember, these are 2 distinct groups with very different histories.
Now, the big umbrella term for any French speaker in Canada is francophone. And yeah, while the huge majority of them live in Quebec, you'll find vibrant francophone communities all across the country.
In fact, and this is a really important point to remember for the test, New Brunswick is Canada's only officially bilingual province, and that's a direct result of its large and historic Acadian population. All right, let's jump ahead again to our third pivotal moment. We're now in the 1960s. This is a period that completely, and I mean completely, reshaped Quebec and basically set the stage for all the modern political debates we still hear about today. This was the Quiet Revolution.
And it's called the Quiet Revolution for a good reason. There were no guns, no violent uprising. Instead, it was this deep, profound, and just breathtakingly fast change in society. I'm talking, in the span of a single decade, Quebec went from being this traditional, rural society dominated by the church to a modern, secular, and industrial powerhouse.
So, what exactly changed? Well, just about everything. The shift was absolutely massive. First, the provincial government grabbed control over education and healthcare, taking it away from the super-powerful Catholic Church. Second, it focused on empowering Francophones economically. The most famous example of this is when they nationalized all the private electricity companies into one giant state-owned corporation, Hydro-Quebec. And third, and this is huge, the whole sense of identity changed. People started thinking of themselves less as religious French Canadians and more as modern, secular, and confident Quebecers, with their identity tied directly to the province of Quebec.
And all that new confidence that came out of the Quiet Revolution, it led straight to the ultimate political question. People started thinking, hey, if we can run our own economy and our own society this well, maybe we should just become our own country.
So they put that question to a vote. In 1980, there was a referendum on sovereignty. The no side, the side that wanted to stay in Canada, won pretty decisively with almost 60% of the vote. But look at that yes number, over 40%. That's a massive number of people who wanted out, or at least a new deal. So yeah, this issue was far from over.
And that brings us to 1995. After years and years of constitutional talks that just went nowhere, Quebec held a second referendum. And this time, the result was absolutely stunning. The no side won by less than 1%. I mean, the entire country was holding its breath. Canada came to the absolute brink of splitting up. It is, without a doubt, one of the most dramatic moments in modern Canadian history.
Okay, so in the years after that near miss, there was a real push for reconciliation. And in 2006, Canada's Parliament passed this really important symbolic motion. It recognized that the Quebecois form a nation within a united Canada. Now, you have to understand this distinction, it's key. In this context, nation doesn't mean a separate country. It means a people, a group with a shared culture and history. It was a really powerful gesture of respect, even if it didn't change Quebec's legal status one bit.
So let's bring this all home. This whole history we've been talking about, this story of negotiation, tension, and compromise, it hasn't just shaped Quebec. It has profoundly shaped the Canada that every single one of us lives in today.
I mean, you can see Quebec's fingerprints all over modern Canada. Politically, its influence led directly to the Official Languages Act, which is why Canada is officially bilingual. Institutionally, Quebec has its own unique titles, like calling its legislators MNAs. Culturally, just think of powerful symbols like the fleur-de-lys flag, or huge celebrations like the Fête Nationale holiday. And even on the world stage, Quebec's presence makes sure Canada has a strong voice in La Francophonie, which is the global community of French-speaking nations.
So, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. The relationship between Quebec and the rest of Canada isn't some problem that needs to be solved. In many ways, it is Canada. The entire country was built on, and continues to be redefined by, this constant back and forth of negotiation, of compromise, and of figuring out how we can be different together.
Which kind of leaves us with one last question to think about. This whole story has been about adapting and redefining a partnership. So if that idea, negotiation and compromise, is truly at the heart of what it means to be Canadian, what do you think the next great negotiation is going to be about?